are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. Marcus Benjamin here, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website, CanesCounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30. And transfer portal season just keeps rolling on. You know, it just transfers in, transfers out. It's kind of the name of the game at this time of the year. And to talk about it all, I've got Adam Friedman, who is the expert when it comes to the transfer portal for Rivals.com, to talk about Miami's transfers. Thanks for joining me today, Adam.
Yeah, of course, man. Looking forward to going through this Miami class. It's been fun following the Canes during the portal season. It always is. And December, they were incredibly active, brought in a lot of really good players. Obviously, Carson Beck, the headliner there, but a really good and deep class. And they made some significant strides here in the spring transfer portal window.
Absolutely. Carson Beck is definitely probably the gem of the class, not in the spring window, but the winter window. But this spring window had a lot of Canes fans nervous because it took a while for Miami to kind of get going here. But once they got going, they did get going, and they continue to get going. As of last night, you've got Keionte Scott, cornerback from Houston, just for a little while, pit stop at Houston. But he's played his last 3 years at Auburn, added to the roster. So Miami now added 2 defensive backs, coupled with Jakobe Thomas from Tennessee. But your thoughts on Keionte Scott and just his impact to the Miami Hurricanes roster?
Yeah, he's just a strong for sure. Brings good length to the secondary there, and he really will help add depth to a position that's been really a defensive unit that's been completely revamped in the secondary during the transfer window. OJ Frederic obviously is returning there, and hopes are very high for him. But pretty much every other position in the secondary is going to see probably a brand new starter, somebody who's come in through the transfer portal window this cycle. We're not talking about previous cycles anymore. In this cycle, Keionte Scott's going to have a chance to find his niche there and make his presence felt on the back end, using that size, that length, and his experience as well.
Yeah, Miami's got like a loaded DB room all of a sudden. Last year, it was a detriment, let's just say, to the team. Miami had the best offense in college football and the number 1 overall draft pick with Cam Ward, yet still couldn't make the playoffs because, Miami couldn't stop a lot of offenses from scoring. So they went in with acquiring players from the transfer portal, especially at defensive back. So they actually tried to get A.J. Haulcy, and there's this, of course, huge controversy about him as, he wanted $2 million. I don't know how much truth there is to that. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But do you think Miami kind of missed out on A.J. Haulcy, or did they dodge a bullet there? And also, do you think, that $2 million rumor is real?
First off, yes, they missed out on an incredible talent, right? Like one of the best DBs in the transfer portal cycle, not just the spring transfer cycle, a top 30 prospect in the transfer rankings. Really all Big 12 selection last season. Really made his presence felt on a secondary and a defensive unit that, I guess was tried a lot, we'll say, in the Big 12, right? So he saw a lot of targets at him, and he was able to make a lot of plays, right? And so that type of experience would have been a major boost to the Miami secondary. We're looking at this group right now. It's interesting to see how he would have fit in if he were to have picked Miami. There's obviously a whole new group there, and clashing personalities. Who knows what would have occurred there? That you just don't know how a team is going to mesh until they're all in the building, and so that may have played a role in the decision there to not go all in on the negotiation. We'll say, in terms of whether or not the number was true or not. it's all negotiation, right? It's all the quote unquote game, right? We're looking for, uh, if I'm an agent, I'm looking for, the way to get my player, my rep, or my client, I should say, the best possible deal, right? And putting something out there, floating something out there, whether it's from Miami or from the agent side or the player side. Who knows who's to say there, but um, it's all part of the negotiation. LSU came in at the end and was able to get him, add him to their really impressive transfer class as well. So Miami has done a lot of work in the secondary in this transfer class. I think they're pretty satisfied with how they've done in the portal, what their defense is going to look like in this upcoming season, and it's just a matter of this secondary coming together as a unit to make sure that, number one, they improve off of last year, but number two, they are not a detractor from the success that is this coming season, right? Like they were last season. So um, overall, Miami fans should be really happy about how the Canes have done in the secondary this cycle, but losing out on a potential team leader, essentially, it does sting a bit, sure, but the unit has the talent now to be really strong, and should kind of help lessen the sting a little bit of losing like a player that many thought could be a future star in Zaquan Patterson.
Yeah, Miami lost Zaquan Patterson, as you just mentioned, and they also gained a Jakobe Thomas as well. Many feel like Thomas is like more of a consolation prize, because they weren't able to get an AJ Haulcy. But I think he can be an impact player. I think he can be a player that is going to stimulate competition in that defensive back room. That defensive back room is absolutely loaded right now because you got a potential starter in Zachariah Poyser. He's a guy who Miami got through the transfer portal in the winter window, and he seems like he's in line to be the starter for Miami. And you still have veterans on the team like Markeith Williams, who looks like he is stepping up from what we saw in spring. And then you also have Charles Brantley, who's a guy who they got from the transfer portal as well in the winter window from Michigan State, who seemed like he was going to be slotted as that nickel corner. So now you bring in a Keionte Scott. So you kind of wonder, like, okay, is it going to be Scott? Is it going to be Brantley? And then you're assuming that it's going to be Xavier Lucas, who they also brought through the winter window as your starting cornerback, along with OJ Frederick. But where does that leave like Damari Brown, who at one point was considered maybe one of the best corners of his class? So he has filled out, and he is looking to really have a bounce back year from last year where he had an injury for most of the season. So when you kind of talk about all of these defensive backs, where do you think Jakobe Thomas really kind of falls here in that room?
Yeah, his experience is going to really help him, right? Almost 1,500 snaps in his career. He's a senior. He's really done a good job. He did a good job last year of making his presence felt for Tennessee. I think he had more than 20 tackles. He had a couple of pass breakups. He even had a sack last year. So his experience is going to pay dividends there in a secondary where there is some experience, sure, but seeing the type of competition that Thomas has seen throughout his career, right? And in particular last season, going up against SEC offenses, right? Lucas coming over from the Big Ten, Brantley coming over from the Big Ten, Poyser coming up from the I guess FCS level. We're looking at a group of transfers in the secondary that isn't quite familiar with the type of competition that Thomas is. So that's going to pay dividends for him. It's just going to be about how does he mesh with this group? How quickly does he pick up the system? How coachable is he, right? And essentially how quickly can he perform at a high level when camp opens again in August?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a lot of competition in that defensive back room. Other defensive backs I haven't even mentioned will be also in the mix, like Ethan O'Connor, who was another
Mhm.
transfer that they also brought in as well. And then you've got players who were brought in through recruiting, like Dylan Day, who's in his second year at Miami, and you also have Chris Ewald, who's and Amari Wallace, who are recruits from the 2025 class who will be competing, who impressed during spring. So it'll be interesting to see just, who ends up being that starting five in the defensive back field.
Yeah, no doubt the strength though of this defense is in the front seven. I mean, you still have Ruben Bain there. You got Wesley Bisante. You've got Amon Moten. You also brought in David Blay earlier in the transfer cycle. So the
Right.
strength is in the front seven, and it's going to be up to the secondary to hold the fort down until those guys can get to the quarterback, right?
Yeah,
We'll see how things turn out there though.
absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned the front seven because they did bring in another player from that front seven, which is Kamal Bonner, linebacker from NC State. What do you think he brings to the Miami Hurricanes?
He brings some youth, right? He brings a ton of upside. He played really well when he got on the field last season. He started the last 7 games of the season after an injury allowed him to move up the depth chart, and he really didn't relinquish that at all. He was a converted safety from high school, and really a guy who's got a lot of upside and certainly has the physical tools to turn into a cornerstone type of player if he develops the way that the Miami coaches hope. But we'll see how he performs again and takes to the system this offseason. And I don't. It might be tough for him to see consistent playing time this year, just because of the veterans that are ahead of him and kind of entrenched in that linebacking core. But there's a chance for him to get on the field fairly quickly after this year. He'll see a lot of spot duty this year, and depending on how he develops, we'll see him more consistently, I think, in the 2026 season than we do in the 2025 season. But a strong depth take for this year with high upside in the future.
Yeah, definitely going to be interesting to see kind of how his career progresses or if he even stays with Miami. You know how this world of college football kind of works these days. And like you said, he's a young guy and he's got a lot of years ahead of him. Probably won't get a ton of snaps this year just because you got players like Wesley Basaint and Jalen Alderman, who was a transfer from last year, who will probably be slotted as that third linebacker behind Raul Popo Aguirre, who is slotted to be that second linebacker. So he'll probably be in the rotation, but won't be a significant impact player unless one of those guys go down with a major injury. So let's switch over to the offensive side of the ball, the more exciting, I guess you could say, side of the ball, the one that the fans really pay for. They like to see touchdowns and explosive plays. Let's start with the running back, CharMar Brown. I like him probably the most out of all of these transfers. He gets me the most excited because I feel like he can make a direct impact to this team in 2025. Miami's got a pretty solid running back room with Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle, who are projected to be, 1A, 1B starters for next year. But then, you throw in a CharMar Brown with some championship experience with 1,000-yard rushing season already on his resume. What kind of impact do you think he can make for the Miami Hurricanes?
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it there. I mean, a bigger back, but there is some depth already in that Miami running back room. Over 1,000 yards last year, 15 touchdowns for FCS champion North Dakota State. Um, you know, Interesting to see if he's going to be able to see consistent carries, especially early in the season as he gets acclimated to the level of competition, the size, the speed of the types of defenses that they're going to see week in and week out. His average yards per carry, not as high as you would hope for a player who was as heavily recruited as he was, but Again, he's not a real game breaker type. He's 5'11", 215, more of a pound the rock type of guy who's going to be able to move the sticks eventually. We'll see. Miami's got a few of those right now. That's why I say as immediate an impact as maybe Miami fans hoping for, but he is a younger guy, right? Only a sophomore, so he's got a few more years left. Mark Fletcher, Jordan Lyle ahead of him right now on the depth chart, and it'll be again interesting to see how he adjusts to the size speed combination that he's going to see at this level of college football.
Yeah, well, what I like about this spring transfer portal window is that Miami addressed their needs. There was a concern with depth at running back and other position groups, obviously, but they addressed this need, and I think you feel a little bit more calmer, I guess you could say, if you're a Miami Hurricanes fan, with the addition of a CharMar Brown, because running back, we all know that's probably the one position where there's the most attrition. So to add a piece like him, it doesn't force you to play younger guys like a Chris Wheatley Humphrey or Gerard Pringle, who just came in, from the 2025 recruiting class. So I think it's a really great addition to this team, and I think it's a depth piece that was needed. Another position group where I can say Miami really needed to add depth was wide receiver, because if they didn't add a couple of guys here, then we were probably going to see some young guys get a ton of snaps at wide receiver. So Miami added Keelan Marion from BYU, who's also a return specialist, and also Tony Johnson from Cincinnati. Now, these guys don't blow you away with stats or, like a ton of production, I guess you could say, but they definitely have ability to make plays here. So your thoughts on Tony Johnson and Keelan Marion?
Yeah, we'll start with Tony. I mean, Tony is a really consistent player. Coming in, he was, I think over 400 yards receiving the past 2 years. Last season was his first at Cincinnati, coming over from FAU, and really kind of picked up where he left off at FAU, and even upped his yardage totals and his touchdown production. From a season ago at FAU. So impressive to see how quickly he was able to adjust there. He's not the biggest guy, only 5'10", around 190 pounds or so, but a really strong addition to the group, and helps round out the receiving core at Miami. There's a couple of bigger targets already on the roster, but he's going to be able to fill a role for Miami, and certainly provide depth there when the Canes do line up with 4 or 5 wide, and a consistent, just a reliable target. Now that we've got a new quarterback, right, in Carson Beck, we've got a couple of new targets. CJ Daniels, obviously the headliner there, but Tony's somebody who's going to be able to help move the sticks a lot, and thrive when he does get his chances. He saw a fair amount of targets, and the percentage of which he was able to bring in those catches was pretty high too. So look for him to become one of those guys who has a fairly big role in the offense when he is on the field, right? He will see his targets, and he will command some attention from defenses when he does line up there. It'll be interesting to see how Miami is able to throw him into the lineup and make use of him to either move this, free up other receivers to make more plays down the field. So a good player there to keep an eye on. Not 11 yards per reception last season is that's a first down every time he catches the ball, essentially. So we'll see how things turn out there. He did only have one game when he went over 100 yards receiving, so do keep that in mind. But something to look at when he does see the field. He's going to see his targets. He's going to bring in the catches more likely than not, and he's going to help keep the offense on schedule. When you look at what they're doing with with Marion, Keelan Marion, he's I mean, All-American returner, right? So he's going to have an immediate impact on special teams, right? Really impressive to see what he's able to do there at BYU. Over 26 yards per kick return. So, we're going to see Miami start with better field position than they have in the past, right?
Sure.
But he's also on the when he does line up at receiver, over 1,000 yards career receiving yards. So and he's got I think more than 75 catches as well for his career, 7 touchdowns as well there. So an experienced guy for sure on that side of the ball. Somebody who is going to kind of bring some more explosiveness to this Miami offense, and I would imagine he's going to have a few wow plays this year, not just on special teams, but on offense. He's going to, when he turns the corner, he's going to be able to pick up some big chunks of yards and help not just move the sticks, but create some momentum shifting plays there.
That's good stuff for Miami Hurricanes fans to hear for sure. Adam Friedman joining me from Rivals.com. He is the Rivals portal analyst. And I got a question for you, man. Like, because obviously there's a lot of turnover with the transfer portal, like players coming in, players coming out, and we've been told like there's a window, right? And that window has obviously closed a while ago, but yet we still see players, committing to, teams and maybe jumping in the portal or announcing that they are in the portal. So now Miami's brought in these 7 players in the spring window. Spring football obviously is now over. If I'm a player in one of these position groups, I'm probably thinking maybe I should, see what's out there or see, where I can be a starter because, they're bringing in veterans who obviously they believe can make an impact and get significant snaps. For wide receiver, going into spring, there were players that were kind of rumored to being jumping into the portal, at receiver, Ray Joseph, was one of those players, being rumored to go into the portal. Now that they've added a linebacker, does Jalen Alderman or any of these other linebackers now think that they should go into the portal? Of course, the DB room is absolutely loaded right now. Do any of these younger DBs kind of think like, okay, maybe I should jump ship here? Can they still do that? Like, what is the protocol with this transfer portal, which seems to have no rules at all?
Yeah, I mean, from the outside looking in, it really does seem that way. From what I have understood after talking to a lot of different people, it's more about when a player makes their intentions to transfer known, not necessarily when they file the paperwork. If they say to the staff, "Hey, I want to transfer," before the window closed, then it seems like those players do end up finding their way into the transfer portal, even after the window is closed. So, we're still seeing a lot of those players, pop up, right? Not as many. Sure, it's kind of slowed to a trickle, but there are players who have been in the transfer portal, who are really kind of seeing their recruitment kick into high gear right now, right? We're seeing a lot of players still committing, taking visits, talking to a lot of coaches. We're hearing from a lot of agents about that as the weeks kind of go on, right? And these teams are bringing in depth players right now. I mean, let's be honest, right? There aren't many starters available in the transfer portal, but there are players who are maybe younger and looking for an opportunity to prove themselves and trying to take advantage of the few roster spots that are left at the Power 4 level, and even really kind of that high FCS level too. So I think just one of the teams that in my head right now is like Troy lost a ton of their top players, right? But they're going to need to backfill, and that's a team that has historically produced a lot of really talented players who go on to the Power 4 level and end up raising their stock when it comes to the NFL draft. And we'll see what types of players they bring in too. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how things progress on that front. But yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, it's hard to nail down any firm, hard and fast rules when it comes to when players can enter the transfer portal and kind of when that deadline is, right? Because there's not a whole lot of public visibility into that.
Yeah, just like Mario Cristobal said, the transfer portal is always open. And it seems like that's just the case. When people say, okay, well, it's closed, it's maybe not really, but that's the world of college football right now.
Yeah, I mean, look at what happened with Xavier Lucas, right? I mean, he never actually showed up in the transfer portal. His name was never actually in there, right? He just transferred to Miami, and he's on the Miami roster. I mean, the word is we'll eventually probably see some sort of lawsuit, may be too strong of a word there, but we'll eventually see some sort of official complaint, right, registered on that front, and just going to see how things turn out there. But the transfer portal, to quote, like you said, Mario Cristobal, it's always open. Players can transfer from one college to another without really entering the transfer portal if they want to just enroll at another school. So we'll hopefully we get some more hard and fast rules with this in the not too distant future. But for now, this is where we live, and having to track it in this fashion.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm pretty sure your head has been spinning ever since the winter portal window has opened. But definitely glad to have your insight on that. Miami's class, overall. I mean, I don't know if you can go back all the way to the winter portal and really kind of go through all of the players that they got, like David Blake, Carson Beck, obviously. Charles Brantley. I mean, the list goes on of the players that they brought in. Definitely a lot more impact players that they brought in than going out from the Miami Hurricanes. But when you're looking at all these teams, when you look at the transfer portal haul that Miami brought in this winter and spring window, how does it compare to other teams?
Yeah, they have I think more than the large majority of teams out there. They've signed more 4-stars than the large majority of the teams out there, and certainly one of only 3 players with a 5-star transfer in Carson Beck. That's a lot of the position value is goes into that rating, but certainly a proven player with a high a high floor, we'll say, for sure. And we'll see how much he can improve and how he comes off of that elbow injury. But this Miami team is primed for another strong year after bringing in at least 6 4-stars, maybe more when the final rankings have really been published, but we'll have to see on that front. But this team, it's one of the best classes, not just in the nation, but they're going to have a top 25 class for sure in the transfer team rankings. But when it comes to the ACC rankings, we're looking at probably having, I would say, one of the top 5 classes in the ACC for sure when all is said and done after the final rankings come out. And I would imagine you see these transfers having a massive impact on the upcoming season. We mentioned the secondary for sure, and then obviously Carson Beck and CJ Daniels we didn't touch on very much, but the receiver coming over from LSU is going to have an outsized role in this offense. And we'll see how Miami is able to bounce back after last season, which was frankly somewhat disappointing with not making the college football playoff, and despite having essentially an All-American in Cam Ward and number 1 overall pick too. So I think Miami fans should really be excited about the season, excited about the way that Miami went about recruiting the transfer portal, and the targeted moves that they made, even if it wasn't from a numbers standpoint, a massive class.
Awesome stuff from Adam Friedman from Rivals.com, the transfer portal analyst and expert. Thank you once again for joining me on this episode of the Storm Tracker podcast, and I hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. Appreciate you.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the website, CanesCounty.com, for free, and also subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Until the next episode.